Good morning, everybody. Today is Shabbos of Kuf Yud Beis. We will begin from Kuf Yud Beis and all 4 lines from the top, 112a1. We're discussing the halachas of making knots on Shabbos. There is 2 primary halachas. One is making a knot and one is untying a knot, kosher and matir. Basically, we're going to have 3 types of knots, those that are biblically forbidden to make, those that are rabbinically forbidden to make, and those that are permitted to make. There's actually a major machlokas. What is the main distinction between those 3 levels? Is it going to be how easy or hard it is to take it out, or is it going to be more, are they usually made for long-term versus short-term? Okay, so 2 different types, meaning when we say, for example, the sailor's knot is biblically forbidden, is that because it's like a permanent type of knot, so it's hard to take out, the structure of the knot is very structured, or is it because people usually make that knot for long term? So is it a time issue, or is it a structure of the knot issue? Okay, so just keeping that in mind, that's a big machlokas, we'll have to keep that in mind. Okay, so 112a1, miftach chaluka. So one of the permissible knots is a woman is allowed to open up the opening of her chemise. So for example, pshita, it's obvious, since it's made to be open and closed, seems like if you're going to have any type of knot that's permitted, that would definitely be permitted because it's made to open and close. So it's not, the structure is very loose structure of the knot, and it's definitely done on a temporary basis. So it's tzricha de islay trade dashi. We're talking about where it has 2 openings, it has 2 straps. So theoretically, only one of them has to be opened and closed. So I think chadmi now, but to the miftal, one of the straps is tied permanently. So therefore, because all you need to do is open the other strap to open and close it. The Mishnah teaches no. At the end of the day, either of these knots are done in a more temporary basis, and therefore it would be permitted. The chute sivacha, or is that sivava? I can't even see her. I think it's sivacha. Sivacha. A woman's allowed to untie the strings of her hat. Those are also done in a more temporary basis. Pshita, that's obvious. Letzricha is talking about dervichala. Talking about a hat that's loose on her. I might think mishlaf shalfala. I might think that since the hat is loose on her, so she doesn't have to constantly untie the knots. She might just slip the hat on and off. So therefore, maybe that's prohibited. Kamash Malan, the Isha Chas al Sara teaches us that a woman is sparing about her hair, umishra shayalam, and she'll usually untie it. Even if you have a hat that is loosely fitting, so theoretically you could just take off the hat without untying the knots. Those type of knots that a woman will make are more on the looser temporary basis because she's concerned if she slips off the hat too much, she's going to pull out some of her hair and she doesn't want to lose her hair. And therefore, those types of knots as well would be permitted to tie and untie on Shabbos. Now, if this woman knows that she's leaving there on a permanent basis, that could be different. We're just talking about a standard type of hat. Urtzuas minol v'sandal, and the straps of a shoe or a sandal would be permitted. Now, again, I just want to keep in mind, this Gemara is not for practical applications. Eventually, I want to get to the Shabbos home where we'll go through them. So we're getting the basic guidelines here, but don't come out and practice just from these Gemaras because you really have to figure out how to tweak them to every individual situation. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to untie the straps of your shoe or your sandal, and there's no problem of kosher or matir, no problem of tying or untying. R'tzuos minol v'sandal. Itmar was stated, we're now on 11282. Hitter r'tzuos minol v'sandal. Regarding somebody who untied the straps of a shoe or a sandal. Tani chada, one brisa taught, chayiv chatas. If you did that inadvertently, you're liable to bring a chatas offering. That is a biblical prohibition you broke by untying the straps of your shoe or sandal. B'tanya idach, we learned in a second brisa, pater avlasar. It is, you're exempt biblically, but it's still rabbinically forbidden. B'tanya idach, and then we learned in another brisa, mutal chachila, it is totally permitted to untie the straps of your shoe or sandal. So we got major issues. We have 3 brisas and 3 different opinions. B'tanya idach mutal chachila, kasha minol aminol, kasha sandal sandal. So now we have an internal contradiction between these brisas from the case of shoe and the case of the sandal. The Gemara says, minol aminol kasha, the case of shoe on shoe is not a question. Hadik tani chayiv chatas, that which it says you're liable to chatas, which means it's a biblical liability. It's talking about the knots of shoemakers. So the shoemaker inserts a strap into a hole in the shoe and ties a knot in one end of the strap to prevent it from coming out. This knot is meant to stay there indefinitely. It's part of the shoemaking process. That would be a biblical knot. That's both a structure that's made, it's a type of knot that's made to be permanent, and your intent is for it to be permanent. Okay, so that's the first case. That's biblically liable. Pater aval aser, exempt but rabbinically forbidden. Bidder abanan, those are called the knots of the rabbis. Now, what are the knots of the rabbis? So basically, when the rabbis would put on their shoes, they would not need to tie the straps tightly around their feet. Rather, they did it more of like a slip-on fashion. So the rabbis would do loosely tied knots in order that they could slip their feet in and out of them without having to tie and untie them. Since the rabbis spent all day studying, it doesn't bother them to have loosely fitting shoes, because if you're walking a lot, you don't want it to be loosely fitting because then your shoes will fall off your feet. But if you're anyway studying all day, so you're not worried about that. So it makes more sense to do it in a looser fashion so you can just slip on and off your feet without having to worry about tying and untying them. So these were kind of permanent, but not so permanent. They were made to be there all day, but not on a necessarily a permanent basis. They say during the muddy seasons, they would untie them or retie them to prevent their shoes from slipping off their feet by becoming stuck in the mud, Rashi says. So they would keep them long-term, but not really permanent. And therefore, these knots would be rabbinically forbidden to tie or untie on Shabbos. Mutter chachila, what is the case that is totally permitted? B'nei mechoza, these are knots of the inhabitants of mechoza. So basically, they were very careful about how they dressed. And they wanted their shoes to fit just so. And so when they put on their shoes in the morning, they would give it that nice, snug feeling. Murray, there's somebody waiting over there, I think. They would give it a nice, snug feeling. And when they took off their shoes at night, they would have to untie them. So it comes out every morning, you knew you're untying it 12 hours later. That's totally temporary. So that would be totally permitted to tie and untie. Double knot. Murray wants to know if you can double knot. The answer will be no, you won't be allowed to, because that's more of a permanent basis. Okay, so basically now we have three levels again. We have those that are meant to be long-term permanent, are biblically forbidden. Those that are on a more permanent basis but not totally permanent are going to be rabbinically forbidden. And then those that are made to tie and untie, like the people of Mechoza, that would every morning they knew they were untying it that night, that would be totally permitted. Now I want to point out, we did see in the Mishnah already that Rameir holds it has to be that you can untie it with one hand. So if you're thinking about our shoes nowadays, if you want to make a bow, that will be totally fine, because a bow will be made on if your goal when you make the bow is you're going to take it out tonight, so that means you're having it in mind for even less than a day, and it could come out with one hand, that'll be totally fine. Anything more than that, if your bow is meant long-term, let's say you turn your bow into the type that you only untie it once every 6 months, otherwise you just slip your shoes in and out, that could be a problem, because that might be a rabbinically forbidden at least. Or if you make a knot where it takes more than one hand to pull it out, that could be a problem as well. So we'll see more about that in practical halacha. Okay, so that's how we reconcile the three brisas regarding shoes. Now let's talk about sandals. Sandal a sandal akasha. Sandals on sandals, not my question. Hadiktani chayav chatas, that which it says you're liable to chatas, which means a biblical liability. Biditaya de katri eshkufe. That's some of the knots of sandals of Arabian merchants that shoemakers tie. So the sandals of Arabian merchants had straps fastened to them by professional shoemakers, Rashi says, and these are meant to be totally permanent. That's biblical. Hatar aval asr, the case that's exempt but rabbinically forbidden. Bidechu marta de katri inu. Those are amateur knots which are tied by the wearers themselves. So sandals of people other than the Arabian merchants, they had their straps connected by the wearers themselves, not by the professional shoemakers. And these knots are made to be tied and untied. Although sometimes they would last for a week or a month, that would be rabbinically forbidden because it's not totally permanent, but it's on a more permanent basis. That would be rabbinically forbidden. What would be the case? It would be totally permitted by a sandal, a sandal that two people wear which means if you have a sandal that is shared by two people with different size feet, so then you have to constantly change the knot of that sandal. So that's definitely on a temporary basis, and that would be okay. Kid Rav Yehuda, and this is like Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda, Achua Rav Salah, Chasida, Havale Ahu Zuga de Sandali. Rav Yehuda, the brother of Avsala, the pious one, had a certain pair of sandals. Zimnin de Nafik Be'iu. Sometimes he went out with it. Zimnin Nafik Be'inuke. Sometimes his child wore those sandals. Also, Kamein Dabai. So Rav Yehuda came in front of Abai. Amarle, Kahai Gafnamai. He said, if these sandals that I have, am I allowed to tie and untie them so my son can wear them? Amarle, Abai said to him, Chayiv Chatas. Abai said, if you do that, you're liable to Chatas. That is a biblical liability if you untie them and give them to your child. Amarle, what? Rav Yehuda said back to him, Hashta Pater Aval Asr Kakashli. So Rav Yehuda said back to Abai, if you would have told me that it was exempt but rabbinically forbidden, I would have had a problem with that even. And now you're telling me it's biblically forbidden? What? If you would have told me it's rabbinically forbidden, I would have had problems why you wouldn't permit it. You're telling me if I do that, I'm liable to chatas? My time. So Abai said back, what is so difficult? Well, what's the problematic about my ruling that I'm telling you can't take out this knot on Shabbos? Amarle, Rav Yehuda said, Mishum de B'kol Nami, because even on the weekdays, Zimna nafikna be'ana, zimna nafik be'yanuko. Sometimes I wear it, sometimes my child wears it. It's not that I wear it all week, and now I'm asking you to transfer it to my child. It happens to be even during the week, we constantly trade off. Amarle, Abai said back, Abai said, oh, you didn't tell me that. I thought they were your shoes, which you tie long term, and now all of a sudden you wanted to change it to your child. So I understood that to be a permanent knot. That was long term, and all of a sudden you want to change it. That's biblical liability. You're telling me now that you constantly change it between you and a child. That is totally permitted. Okay, that's what I'm saying. They're kind of complicated, these halachas. That's why I don't want practical applications until we actually go through them in the Shabbos home. Rabbi Yirmiyah have a kazal basrei de Bravo bekarmelis. Rabbi Yirmiyah was walking behind Bravo in a karmelis. A karmelis is a place that is biblically you're allowed to carry there, but rabbinically you're not allowed to carry in a karmelis. Our areas where we make erevs in would be a karmelis if you didn't have the erev up. So if you want to carry around Savannah, that's generally going to be a karmelis, which would be rabbinically forbidden. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was walking behind a Bravo in a karmelis. If Zikrat Sua de Sandale, we're on 11283, halfway down Kufya Beis and Aleph, a strap of his sandal broke off. So now the sandal fell off his foot, and he can't wear his sandal. Amarle, Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Bravo, my nabila, what can I do? What would be permissible? So if you're wearing a sandal and the strap breaks, what would be permissible on Shabbos? Is there anything you could do, a way to fashion it that you can still wear it? Amarle, so obviously you can't fix the shoe. Plus, if you want to just put something on it to just help hold it against your foot, you have to make sure that what you put on it is not muktzah. So what can we use over here that won't fix the shoe? Because that could be a problem of tikkun mana, of fixing it up. But on the other hand, so we can theoretically put like a rope or something around the shoe in your foot so you can continue wearing it. But make sure whatever you take is not muktzah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Ravo, what can I use? My navila, what can I do with it? Amarle, Ravo said, Shekol gamilach, take a moist reed, the chazi lamachal behema, which is fit for animal food. So a dry reed, which nobody eats and animals don't eat, is muktzah. But a moist reed that animals will eat, so animal food is not muktzah. So take that moist reed, ukuroich ilave, and wind it around the sandal, and place the strap, and then you can wear it until you reach a private domain. So Michael wants to know that's like tying a knot. Well, you didn't tie a knot, you just said wrap it around it. You're not tying, you're just wrapping it around your foot and the... Right.
So does that mean you private domain you can tie up?
Then no. When we reach private domain, you'll probably take it off until you put on a new shoe. Okay. Abaya v'kakai kamed Rav Yosef. Abaya was standing in a courtyard in front of Rav Yosef. If siklei ritzua, a strap of Abaya's sandal broke off. Amrle, he said to Rav Yosef, "My yavile, what can I do over here? I can't tie a knot. What can I do with my sandal?" Amrle, Rav Yosef said to him, "Shavke." He said, "Oh, why don't you just leave it there? It's muktzah. Your sandal is muktzah, and you cannot do anything with it. Leave it there." So Frakta Gemara, Maishna made Rabbi Yirmiyah. What's the difference between the two stories? How come Rabbi Yirmiyah allowed Rabbi Vo to wrap a moist rida around it and walk in it, yet Rabbi Yosef would not allow Abaye to do anything with the sandal, and now that he told him the sandal is muktzah. It's a broken sandal, he says it's muktzah. What's going on? What's the distinction between the two stories? So Maishna made Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Gemara says, Hasam le minter, Hacham minter. The case of Rabbi Yirmiyah, where were they walking? They're working in an open area, a Carmelis. If they would leave the shoe there, that's not a guarded, protected area. The shoe will get lost. You will have financial loss if you can't save the shoe. As opposed to the story where Rabbi Yosef was in a courtyard, which was a guarded, protected area. It's not going to get lost. So you'll come back for it after Shabbos. Rabbi Yosef said it's muktzah. So at first glance, the distinction is whether you're going to suffer the loss of the shoe or not. However, the commentaries have major problems with that explanation. And it seems like Rashi's understanding that just makes a difference, whether it's protected or not. But the Rishonim have major problems. Because since when does a monetary loss allow you to break the rules of muktzah? We have that. So if it truly is muktzah, your broken shoe, because it's not wearable, then even in the story with Rabbi Yirmiyah, it should have been muktzah. And even if he was going to suffer the loss, he should have had to suffer the loss, because we don't find that muktzah is broken because you're going to, right? If you leave your computer in the outside, are you allowed to bring it inside? We'll see more about that. It's not so simple. You can't just break the rules of muktzah because you're going to lose the item. So how is that permitting it? So rather, the Ravid says on a much deeper level, he goes to the mindset of the individual. Okay, so basically this sandal that broke, is it muktzah or not? So based on your mindset, that will make the distinction. The Ravid says, if your sandal breaks in a Carmelis or in an unprotected area, you don't want to leave it there. Therefore, you think to yourself immediately, oh, I still need to wear the sandal. I'm going to figure out a way how to wear the sandal. So because I don't want to suffer the loss, in my mind, I never view this as a broken sandal. I view it as a sandal that I need to figure out how to keep this on my foot. So therefore, it's never removed from my mindset. Therefore, it never became muktzah in the first place. Therefore, you're allowed to do it. As opposed to in the courtyard, if you're in your house or courtyard and your shoe breaks, what do you think to yourself? You think to yourself, oh, I guess it's broken. I guess I'll have to fix it after Shabbos. That thought process, which is normal to have in a protected area, makes it muktzah, because now there's nothing for you to do with it anymore. You're not going to try to say, oh, maybe I could find a reed or something to do. You're thinking to yourself, okay, I'll leave it here for after Shabbos. Therefore, that's the deeper reason why in the courtyard it would be muktzah, and in the Carmelis it wasn't muktzah. Okay. Frakta Gemara, Bahamanahu. So basically we're saying now, in the courtyard, since the shoe broke, and you're not going to come up with a weird way to try to save it, it's muktzah. So therefore you just have to leave it there. And that's why Rav Yosef told Abaye to leave it there, right? The problem is, if you have a broken utensil that's still usable, has still some function, that's not called muktzah. Muktzah is when it has no function anymore. So Abaye asked, V'habmanahu, this broken shoe is still a utensil. Because if I want, I could change it from my right foot to my left foot. Basically, we'll see, there's two straps. Welcome, Andy. You just come from Taibi? Wow. You get a lot of schar halicha. Okay, so basically there's two straps on a sandal. There's the inner strap and the outer strap. Now, the inner strap doesn't bother you as much if it breaks because it's not as visible. So you'll come up with certain ways how to fix it. The outer strap, which is more visible to people, that if it breaks, you're not necessarily going to fix it. So this case, the outer strap broke. The question Abaye said to Rav Yosef is, okay, so granted the outer strap broke, but I can still use this sandal on my other foot, and then on my other foot, the outer strap becomes the inner strap. Let's say the strap on your left foot, your left sandal, so the left sandal, the left strap is the outer one, right? So if you switch the sandal to your right foot, that means the left strap is now the inner one. So Abaye is asking, it's still usable because I can just switch it to my other foot. So va'amanahu, because if I want, I could just switch it from my right foot to my left foot. So Amar Le, Rav Yosef said back to Bai, Midikimitaritz Rav Yochanan Liba de Rav Yehuda. Since Rav Yochanan clarified the view of Rav Yehuda, who says that a sandal whose outer strap holder broke off is no longer considered utensil, Shmamina halach Rav Yehuda, we see that halach is like Rav Yehuda, which is basically if the outer strap breaks, since again, even if you try to fix it up, it's going to be visible and looks clumsy, that loses the status of a shoe. And that's why it was muksam. And now we'll explain right now what was the story with Rabbi Yehuda, this ruling with Rabbi Yehuda, that if the outer strap holder breaks, it's muksam. Mahi, what are we referring to? The Tanya went to the Brayso, sandal shnifsekushte aznav, a sandal that both ears broke off. These are the ear-like flaps that come over the top of the foot and are grasped by the wearer while putting on the shoes. Tongue? Is that what you grasp when you put on your shoe? That's what the tongue's for? Never knew what the tongue was for. Michael's saying these two ears are the tongue. Okay. Okay. When you have a shoe, that's what the tongue is for? You're supposed to grasp it to put it on? Do people do that? I never knew that.
I once grasped it and pulled it out accidentally.
Okay. Okay, anyway, so the Tanya on the right, a sandal of shenifsekushte aznav, a sandal that both ears broke off. Oishte Yosef, or both of its strap holders. Oishenitel kol akaf shalai, or a sandal whose entire sole was removed. Tar, it is pure. Basically, at this point, it loses its status of utensil, and even if it's tameh, once you lose the status of utensil, the tumah departs from it. Okay, so this means it loses status of utensil. Achas me'aznav, if only one of its ears broke off. Michael, do they have two tongues or one tongue? I'm saying these sandals had two tongues, two ears. Ear-like flaps that came over the top of the foot are grasped by the wearer putting on the shoe. It seems like in those days they had like two.
Sandals?
Yeah, kind of. Okay, the ears, whatever the ears are. Okay, right, so the sides kind of. 112A3 right column.
2 years.
Okay, so again, achas me'aznav, if only one of the ears broke off, or achas mi'tresi yosav, or one of its strap holders broke off, or the majority, but not all of the sole was removed, tameh, so then it still is tameh. It's either susceptible tumah, or if it was tameh, the tumah stays on it, because it's still called a utensil. Rabbi Yehuda says it depends which strap or strap holder. Nifseka pnimis tameh. If the inner strap holder broke off, the sandal is tameh. Because again, the inner part is not so visible, so you don't mind just doing like some type of fixing up on it, even if it's because it's not going to be visible anyways. But if the outer strap holder broke off, then it is pure, because that, in your mind, that loses the status of utensil, because you're not going to try to fix that because that's visible. Okay, so according to Yehuda, it makes a difference if it's the outer one or the inner one. The Amar Ula, V'itim Rabba Bar Bachana Rabbi Yochanan. When Ula said, or if you or others say, Rabba Bar Bachana said, Rabbi Yochanan, Kimachleikas le'inyan Tumah, just like we have a machlokas regarding the rules of Tumah, whether it loses its status of utensil, and therefore the Tumah departs from it. Kach machlokas le'inyan Shabbos. So too, it's machlokas regarding Shabbos, whether it becomes muktzah or not. Because again, if you have, by the rules of Shabbos, something loses the status of utensil, it's muktzah. Avoloi le'inyan chalitza, but it's not the same machlokas regarding the rules of chalitza. So we have 3 different cases where it's relevant to rules of a shoe. Regarding tumah, whether you want to know if the tumah departs from it, if it loses status of shoe. Regarding Shabbos, you want to know if it becomes muktzah, if it loses status of shoe. And then chalitza is if you have 2 brothers in the world together, and then one of them dies without children. Then there's a mitzvah of one of the other brothers to marry the wife of the deceased. That is called yibum. If he does not want to marry her, then they do this chalitza ceremony, which breaks the bond, where she removes his shoe from his foot and she spits in front of him. So that's called chalitza, the removing of the shoe. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying not necessarily. So what what is classified as a shoe regarding chalitza is not necessarily the same machlokas regarding Tumah and Shabbos. Okay, so you can't say, oh, if it lost the status regarding Tumah, then obviously it's not a shoe regarding chalitza. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's not the same rules regarding chalitza. Okay, which obviously he didn't explain what he mean. What are the rules regarding chalitza? He didn't say. He just said it's not the same. But we're now on 112A4. So again, this is Rabbi Yochanan's statement that again, this machlokas regarding Tumah would also apply to the rules of Shabbos and Muktzah, but it would not apply to the rules of Chalitza. And we asked regarding this, Rabbi Yochanan liba daman. Who is Rabbi Yochanan saying a statement according to? Ilema liba d'Rabbanan, if he's going according to the Rabbanan, the first opinion of the Brisa. Now the first opinion says that only if both straps or strap holders broke off, that's when it loses status as shoe. If it only lost one of them, it is still called a shoe. That's the Rabbanan's opinion, right? And then Rabbi Yehuda said, no, if the outer one broke off, it loses the status of a shoe. So Ilam Ali with Rabbanan. If Rabbi Yochanan is going according to Rabbanan, Midila Inyan Tumah Mana Have, and saying since regarding Tumah, if the outside strap holder broke off, it still is classified as a shoe. Leidin Shabbos Nami Mana. So Rabbi Yochanan was saying regarding the rules of Muktzah as well, it still is called a shoe and therefore would not be Muktzah according to Rabbanan. Leidin Shabbos Nami Mana Have. Avaloi Lechalitza, but not necessarily would that classify as a shoe regarding Chalitza. The Lav Manahu, because for Chalitza, if one of the strap holders broke off, it would not be called a shoe. Maybe that's what Rabbi Yochanan was saying. V'hatanan, but we learned in a Mishnah in Yevamis, Chaltza shall small biyamin, if she removed the left sandal from his right foot. Chalitzasa kashera, the chalitza is valid. So if the man was wearing a left sandal on his right foot and the woman removed it, the chalitza is valid. So if so, according to Rabbanan, who consider left sandal whose outside strap holder snap a usable utensil, because you can move it to the right foot, so that would work regarding the rules of chalitza as well. So, meaning the Rabbi Yochanan statement then wouldn't make sense. That regarding the rules of Tumah and Shabbos, the Rabbanan say if the outer strap broke, it's still called a utensil, but not regarding chalitza. Why not? If regarding Shabbos and Tumah, it's still called a shoe, because you could just switch it to the other foot. If you switch it to the other foot, it's not the outer strap, it's the inner strap. Regarding chalitza as well, you can switch it to the other foot. So that statement of Rabbi Yochanan, the regarding chalitza doesn't classify as a shoe, would not make sense. So who was Rabbi Yochanan going with? Ve'ela liva Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan's statement was according to Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda said, if the outer strap breaks, regarding Tumah, it loses the status of a shoe. And we don't say that you can transfer it to the other foot. Right? Ve'ela liva Rabbi Yehuda. Midil inyan Tumah lav manahu. And Rabbi Yochanan meant that since regarding Tumah, if the outer strap holder broke, it's not called a utensil, and the Tumah leaves it. Linin Shabbos nami lav manahu. So to regarding Shabbos, a sandal that outer strap holder broke is not called a utensil, and it's muktzah. Avoloi lechalitza, but not regarding chalitza. Demanahu, that it still would be called a shoe, because you can take the left sandal and transfer to the right foot. Maybe that's what it means. Now, Amar da'amrin cholta shall small biyam chalitzasa kashera, but that would not be reasonable, because we could say, when do we say that if the woman removed the left sandal from the right foot, the chalitza is valid? Pecha de la milse manu. That's only if the sandal is considered a utensil for its own function to be worn on the foot it's made to be worn on. So then, even if you put it on the other foot, it will work, because it still functions as a utensil because it can be worn on the foot it's made to be worn on. But regarding the sandal whose the strap snapped off on the outside, the milse lav manahu, it's not made for what it was manufactured, because it was made as a right shoe, and you can't wear it on your right foot anymore because the outer strap holder was broken. So then it did not work for chalitza either. So then Rabbi Yochanan's statement still wouldn't make sense that chalitza is different. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said nifsika hachitzar natar, that if Rabbi Yehuda said if the outer strap holder broke off, it is pure. Alma lav manahu, we see that it's not considered a utensil. So even if it was transferred to the right foot and used for chalitza, it should not be a valid chalitza. So Rabbi Yochanan's statement that distinguishes regarding the sandal whose outer strap holder broke, and he says this applies to Tumah and Shabbos, but not to chalitza, it doesn't make sense according to either opinion. His logic that applies, that these rule applies for Shabbos and Tumah, but not for chalitza. It does not work out in the Rabbanan's opinion. It does not work in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So we're kind of stuck. Who is Rabbi Yochanan going like? The Gemara says, "La'olam aliva de Rabbi Yehuda." Really, Rabbi Yochanan made a statement according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ema, and this is how I should understand Rabbi Yochanan's statement. V'chein lechalitza. He didn't say, but not regarding chalitza. He said, and so too. Meaning Rabbi Yehuda's halacha that he said regarding a shoe's outer strap holder broke is not a shoe regarding tumah. So too regarding Shabbos, it's not called a shoe, and therefore it's muktzah. And so too regarding chalitza, it's not called a shoe for chalitza. V'chein lechalitza. V'ha kamash malan, and Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us when do we say that if she removed the left sandal from the right foot? That we said that if he was wearing the left sandal on his right foot, the Mishnah says that's a kosher chalitza. Heicha de la milse manu. That's only if it's a valid, viable shoe, which means it could have been worn on the left foot that it was made to be worn on. So then if he wore it on his right foot, it still works. Aval hacha, but in this case where the left sandal's outer strap holder broke off, since it can't be functioning anymore as a left shoe, therefore it's not called a shoe, and therefore if he puts that on the right foot, it will not work. Okay, so that's the statement that Rav Yosef previously learned from Rav Yochanan that we go according to Rabbi Yehuda.
Ali, where are you up to?
We just turned the page to Kuf Yud Beis Amid Beis. We're up to the second line from the top.
Okay, thank
Hey,
you.
Rabbi.
Yes, Karen. Yes.
I don't know if y'all can see that. Let me see.
What is that? Oh, yeah, I see toes, and I see, are those toes?
Those are toes, and I think those are ears on each side that flap around, and then they tie.
1 second, let me show this to everybody. 1 second, I think I can do this. I'm gonna spotlight your video, and now I'm gonna turn this around. I think we got this here. You all see this?
Uh-huh.
I can't, every time I go somewhere. Anyway, it looks like it flaps from one side to the other, from the right to the left. And that to me looks like ears.
Yeah, the sides that fold in. Look at the triple.
All right, let's stay social.
What was it? Rabbi?
He took it off already.
I don't know, but what was it?
A picture of a shoe.
You want to look at it again?
Not now. All right, by the way, I realized, is this better if I spotlight my video? Is that better for everybody so it doesn't keep on changing? 1 second.
Yeah, it's better. I don't.
Is this better? Is this better for everybody or worse? What I just did.
It's better.
I don't see any difference.
But I can pin you myself. I can do that myself. Everybody can.
Or, yeah, everybody could, right. Okay, that's true. You could put me, all right. Okay. We're now in 112B1, Kufi Beis and Beis, second line from the top. Frakti Gemara. So now we're saying that Rabbi Yosef is saying that Rabbi Yochanan goes like Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda holds, this is my machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda and their bun. Again, anybody who built from this train.
Whoa.
So the question was, if your outer, according to the Rabbanan, only if both strap holders, the inner and outer strap holder broke, is it considered that the shoe loses the status of a shoe? Because if just one of them broke, you'll still fix it up. Rabbi Yehuda says it makes a distinction if it's the outer one or the inner one. Because if the inner strap breaks, so that's not recognizable. So you'll fix it up in a hubbub type of way, and you don't care how it looks like because the inner strap anyways, people don't see it. As opposed to the outer strap, you're more particular about. So if the outer strap breaks, that will lose the status issue. The Rabbanan would say, I don't care if the outer strap broke, you can still fix it up and you'll just switch it to your other foot. Okay? Frakti Gemara, mi am Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say that we rule like Rabbi Yehuda? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan said, halacha kistam mishnah. We know Rabbi Yochanan goes like whenever you find an anonymous mishnah without an opinion, so Rebbe redacted the mishnayos in that way, that means that we follow the halacha of that anonymous mishnah. Utzanan, and we learned in a mishnah in Kalim. A sandal that one ear broke off, and he repaired it. Tamei Medras, it still has a Tumah of Medras. We know that Medras is if you put someone who's tummy puts their weight on something, even if they're not touching it, so that which is holding their weight becomes an Av HaTumah, just like that person who's an Av HaTumah, like a Zav, a Zava, a Nida, a woman who gave birth. So the Zav here wore the sandal before the ear broke off. So now the sandal became Tamei Medras, and he did not wear it afterwards. And so we want to know, did the Tumah depart or not after the ear broke off? So the Mishnah says, Tamei Medras, it still is Tamei Medras. It keeps that Tumah. Now it doesn't say which ear broke off. My love seemingly is not Loishna Pnimis, Loishna Chitzayna. What seemingly makes a difference if the outer ear broke off or the inner ear broke off. Now, Rabbi Yehuda makes distinctions between inner and outer. He says outer things that broke off, the outer ear, the outer strap holder, that would lose the status of a shoe because people are not going to want to fix it up. And their buttons they only have problems if both of them broke off. So seemingly, this Mishnah, an anonymous ruling, does not make distinction between inner and outer. It seems like it goes like their button, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Whereas the low, no, pnimis dafka. The Mishnah means specifically where the inner ear broke off. That's the case where it retains the status of a shoe, according to Yehuda, because since it's the inner ear, so therefore you don't mind fixing it up because it's not visible anyways. Okay, so that could be going like Yehuda. So what would be the halacha if this Mishnah is truly going like Yehuda? So then what would be the halacha if the outer ear broke off? Remember, that would be machlokes between Yehuda and the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan don't make distinctions between inner and outer ear. They say, I don't care which one, as long as just one of them, you could just always switch it to the other foot and make it inner, and therefore there's no problem unless both of them broke. Rabbi Yehuda holds specifically the inner ear that breaks is fixable, but the outer ear that breaks loses the status of a shoe. So if you're going like Rabbi Yehuda, what will be the status if the outer ear broke? Tahor. That means you would say it's pure. It'll lose the status of a shoe. If so, let's try to plug that back into Mishnah. Aditani, rather than the last part of that Mishnah that Caleb's saying. Nifsika shniya v'tikno. If the second ear broke off after the first one was repaired, and then he repaired it. Tahar min ha-medras, it becomes pure from the medras tumah. Avol tame maga medras, but it remains tame as having touched a medras. So medras tumah is an ava tumah primary source. If you touch a medras, you're a rishon, you're a first level. So this shoe loses the status of medras from when it was worn, because at the end of the day, both ears ended up breaking off, even though they were one after the other. So it loses the medras tumah, but it came in contact with medras because the shoe itself came in contact with itself as it was breaking. So it goes from medras to touching medras. Niflag bididei. Again, avotami maga medras. It has tumah of having touched the medras. Niflag bididam. Let the Mishnah differentiate. If a Mishnah wants to teach us a case where it loses the medras tumah, we can make a distinction within the first case itself if you go according to Yehuda. The Mishnah should have said, when are we talking about that it still is tamei medras if the inner strap broke off? But according to Yehuda, if the outer ear broke off, it would be pure. So why doesn't, if the truly the Mishnah is going to Yehuda, why didn't it make that distinction to show us a case that's pure? So the Gemara says, you're right. We're going to have to explain this Mishnah differently. And by the way, if you want more details about, I didn't get into all the details about the medras and touching medras. If you want, you can look at all the footnotes. I just don't want to confuse everybody here. Amr of Yitzchak ben Yosef, Sir Yitzchak ben Yosef said, Tehei Mishnah Seinu. This is how we should understand the Mishnah. We're now in 112b2. So the Mishnah says a sandal that's tamei medras, you should interpret as dealing with the sandal sheyesh lo arba aznaim va'arba treisiyosim. It's a more complex sandal that has 4 ears and 4 strap holders. Basically 2 ears and 2 strap holders on each side. That's the case of the Mishnah. And when the Mishnah speaks of 1 ear and the second ear, it talks about the ears on the outer side. So the Mishnah is saying if 1 ear breaks off, it's still tamei medras because you can still wear it on account of the remaining ear. But if both ears break off, and we're talking about the outer ears, then it's totally pure from medras tumah. It's going like Yehuda that if the outside ears break off, it's considered unusable, and we don't reckon with the fact, according to Yehuda, that it could be transferred to the other foot and worn there. That's what Rashi says. So again, so we're talking about a sandal that has 4 ears and 4 strap holders. In order not to break the words of Rabbi Yochanan, which means, again, in order not to have a contradiction within Rabbi Yochanan's rulings, we'll work out this Mishnah that is specifically talking about a sandal with 4 ears, and then when the Mishnah means that the ears broke off, it means both outer ears broke off, and that way you can reconcile this Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda, and that will work out the Rabbi Yochanan passes like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Ki Asa Ravin, we're now on 112b2, we're a third of the way down Kuf Yud Beis Amin Beis. Ki Asa Ravin, Amrav Chanan Bar Abba Amarav. When Ravin came, he said in the name of Chanan Bar Abba, name of Rav, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, that a sandal with the outer strap damage makes it lose the status of a sandal, and we don't say you could just transfer to the other foot and then it will be inner damage, which would not disqualify. So again, according to Yehuda, this is my chlokes, I'm just going on this one more time. According to Yehuda, if the outer strap holder or any type of outer damage, Rabbi Yehuda holds you're not going to fix that up because that's going to be visible to people and it will look weird. And the fact that you can then switch it to your other foot and then it'll be the inner, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't reckon with that. He says you look at the way it was manufactured. This was the right foot, the outer part damaged. Rabbi Yehuda says it loses the status of utensil. The Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say no. Outer damage is not a big deal. You'll just switch it to your other foot, and that's called inner damage. So that doesn't lose the status of a shoe until you have both inner and outer damage. That's machlokas in Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. So ki also Ravin. So question is, who do we go like? And again, this could be relevant for the laws of Tumah. It could be relevant for the rules of Shabbos, whether if you have outer damage to your shoe, if it becomes muktzah or not. And then we also have the question of how this would apply to the rules of a chalitza, right? So there's 3 different topics how this is relevant to. So ki asa Ravin, Amar Rav Chanan Bar Abba Amar Rav. When Ravin came, he said name Rav Chanan Bar Abba named Rav. Halach Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. The outer damage would make your shoe not be called a shoe anymore. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ein halach Rabbi Yehuda." The halach does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. Frakti Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, he's the one who's been trying all along to reconcile with Rabbi Yehuda. Umiyam Rabbi Yochanan, how could Rabbi Yochanan really say this? That we don't go like Rabbi Yehuda. V'hamid demetaris Rabbi Yochanan leave Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan clarified the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan spent a lot of time trying to explain to us exactly all about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Shmamina Rabbi Yehuda severely. Sounds like Rabbi Yochanan specifically wanted to pass like Rabbi Yehuda. So how Ravin report that Rabbi Yochanan said we don't like Rabbi Yehuda? Amarai ninu v'alibad Rabbi Yochanan. It was actually machlokas Amarai what Rabbi Yochanan really said. So according to Rabbi Chana or Ula, they cited a statement that implies Rabbi Yochanan goes like Rabbi Yehuda. They disagree with the Ravin who heard from Rabbi Yochanan that we don't go like Rabbi Yehuda. So if you want to know what Rabbi Yochanan held, is machlokas Amoraim. If Rabbi Yochanan passed like Rabbi Yehuda or seemed to imply not like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Tanan Hassan, we learned in a Mishnah in Kalim, Kol Klei Bali Batim Shiuran Kirimoni. The measure of all wooden homeowners' utensils, how big of a hole makes it that it's considered that it's not usable anymore and it loses its status of a utensil, and at that point it's not susceptible to Tumah, and if it was Tameh, the Tumah departs from it. How large would that hole be to lose its status? So it's a hole the size of a pomegranate. Okay, so if you have the hole the size of a pomegranate, at that point, it loses the status of a utensil. Now, a homeowner would not discard a utensil smaller than a pomegranate because he'll just keep it to contain larger items. However, once you reach the size of pomegranate, he's going to throw out that utensil. That's the norm. Chizkiah inquired. Nikiv k'maitzi zayis ustamei. Let's say the utensil developed a puncture the size of an olive. Now, an olive we know is smaller than a pomegranate. And so the utensil got a hole the size of an olive and he clogged up the hole. He sealed it. And then it got another hole the size of an olive and he plugged that one up. Until he completed the plug the size of a pomegranate. Is that called that it loses the status or not? Which means, let's just say a pomegranate is 4 inches wide, okay? So let's say your utensil got a 1-inch hole, and then you plugged it up. And then it got another inch hole. And altogether, your utensil has had at least 4 inches worth of holes. So when we say a hole the size of a pomegranate breaks your utensil, does that mean it has to be at one time, or does that mean collectively over time it has developed holes the size of a pomegranate? Now, one second. The question here is only tumah that you contracted before the first hole was repaired. Tumah that occurs after the first hole was repaired certainly is not nullified, because there, after this tumah, didn't get the size of pomegranate. But the tumah that came in before the first hole, the collective amount of holes after this tumah came on this utensil are more than the size of pomegranate. So maybe that loses that status of a utensil. That was Chizkiah's question. Andy feels very strongly about this. Go ahead, Andy. What do you want to say?
Well, what I kind of remember that for a utensil to completely use the size, you have to like destroy it completely. And the law is telling us that hole, the destruction, but can't the utensil still be used for like something else? And I remember saying even like a shard or something. And that doesn't, like, you got a hole in the side of a jug, the size of a pomegranate, the bottom half of it can still be used.
Andy's referencing a Gemara we had a few weeks ago about the different sizes of shards and holes in shards. And the question is whether it's usable or not. And Andy wants to say this case, at the end of the day, it's still usable every point along the way.
Yeah.
And therefore, Andy wants to say very strongly, it should not lose the status of utensil, correct? Okay. Steve has a point.
The question at this point is, are the previous holes now fixed and plugged up, or is it now one?
Steve, yes, you sealed each hole before the next hole, because if you hadn't sealed them, then you definitely have a size of a pomegranate. But here you sealed up that first inch, and then the next inch opened, and then you sealed that, and then the third inch opened, and then you sealed that, and then the fourth inch opened. So collectively, you have a hole the size of a pomegranate, but you've never had it at one time. That's the question over here. Okay? So that was a question that Chizkiah posed. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said to Chizkiah, Rebbe, my Rebbe, Shanisa Lanu, you've already taught us a certain Mishnah, and I believe that this Mishnah will answer your question. Sandal Shanifsika, and now you'll see why this question was relevant here, because now we're quoting the Mishnah in Kalim that we just referenced a minute ago. Sandal Shanifsika achas me'azna v'tiknu. A sandal that one ear broke off, and you repaired it. Now, according to the Rabbanan, you only lose your status of a sandal until both ears break, right? And according to Behuda, it goes by the outer ears, right? But even according to Behuda, we said this, we're talking about if there's 2 outer ears, so then you only lose the status if both outer ears broke, right? So, sandal that one ear broke off and you repaired it, okay? Tamei medras, at that point, it still has a status of a shoe and it is susceptible to this medras tumah. Nifsika shnia v'tikna, if the second ear then broke off and you repaired it, tar min medras. It's not a shoe anymore. It does not have the standard medras tumah anymore. That medras tumah that it had from before, it will now fall off it because it turns out now both ears have broken off. Avotame maga medras, but it's tame as something that touched medras. Now, I went through this quickly before, and now we're going to get into it a little bit more. So what I want to do is, I'm going to go back one page. I want to read a footnote here that gets a little bit more into this. And note 6 on 112b1, if you have it. And if you don't have the article, don't worry about it. I'm just going to read outside like this. Note 6, a sandal, we're on 112b1, note 6. Again, if you don't have the article, don't worry about it. I'm just reading out here. Just a little introduction to the rules of tumah here. A sandal without any ears is totally unusable and therefore loses its tumah. Since both ears have broken, we regard the sandal as having 0 ears, even though the first ear was already repaired before the second ear broke. Consequently, the sandal loses a medras tumah status, which it acquired prior to the breaking of the first ear. Nevertheless, the sandal retains the lesser level of tumah of a utensil that has touched a medras. A medras is an av. If you touch a medras, you're a rishon. An av is a primary source. A rishon is a first level. It's a level lower. Okay. Now, why is it a rishon? Why is it a first level? This is because even after the second ear has broken off, the sandal is still fit to use as footwear, but the first ear has in the meantime been repaired. Thus, it is still a utensil. But it is no longer the same sandal as the one that became Tamei Medras. That sandal has disappeared with the breaking of the second ear to replace by a new repaired sandal, which was never worn by a Zav. Thus, the Tumah of Medras has departed. Because again, the Medras Tumah came on before any of the breakages occurred, right? So now, this is not the same shoe, but it is a shoe. So it's not the same shoe as originally because both ears are broken off. But it is still a shoe because I've repaired both ears. Okay, so what's its status right now? Okay, so what's the status? Thus, the Tumah of Medras has departed. The Tumah of touching a Medras, so it's come in contact with a Medras. What Tamei Medras has this new shoe come in contact with? What source of Tumah has this new shoe come in contact with? You know what? The old shoe. It came in contact with itself. Okay, thus the Tumah of Medras has departed. The Tumah of touching a Medras, however, remains. This Tumah was acquired by the sandal by virtue of the fact that the sandal was considered to be in contact with itself when it was Tamei Medras. This contact was ongoing. That background noise here.
Wow.
I think I just muted you, Alan. Since this contact was ongoing, even after the first ear was repaired, and in the interim only the second ear has come off, the current sandal is still considered the same sandal as the one which acquired the lesser Tumah. Thus, although the original Tumah Medras departs with the breaking of the second ear, because the original Tumah came on before either ear is broke. Now both ears are broken off, one after the other, even though it was repaired in the interim. Therefore, it's not the same sandal that was originally Tumah. But this new sandal came in contact with its former self in between the first ear and the second ear. Thus, although the original Tumah Medras departs with the break in the second ear, the lesser Tumah of touching a Medras remains. Okay? This is Rashi's approach to this Gemara. So now does everybody get that clear? We now, with all this information, let's plug this back into Chizkiah's question about the case of utensil that got holes and then in holes, but they were repaired in the interim, like this.
Ellie, where are you up to?
Vamrin and Lach, it's Kufya Beis Amid Beis.
Yes,
First, it's like 2/3 of the way down. The first word on the line is Medras.
I got it. Okay.
So the second word is Vamrin and Lach, okay?
Yeah, yes.
Again, so the Mishnah says it's pure from Medras, but it's Tamei as something that contacted Medras because it came in contact with itself. Vamrin and Lach. Now Rabbi Yochanan says, and we asked you, so remember, Chizkiah asked this question, right? Now Rabbi Yochanan says to Chizkiah, Rebbe, you taught us this Mishnah, and now let's go through how you clarify this Mishnah to us. Vamrin and Lach, and Rabbi Yochanan says, we said to you, Rebbe, to Chizkiah, my Shna Rishona, what's the difference when the first ear broke off? At that point, it still has Tumah of Medras, right? Why? The Hakaima Shnia. Because the second ear is still intact. So when the first ear broke, at that point, it's still a utensil, right? One ear breaking doesn't lose status utensil. According to the Rabbanan, because you need both sides to break. And according to Yehuda, it's talking about where there are two ears on the outer side, and only one of the two broke. So once the first ear broke, it definitely has still a status of utensil. Vamrin and Lach, we said to you, Rabbi Yochanan says, my Shna Rishona, what's the difference in the first case, where the first ear broke, it still has Tumah of Medras, the Hakaima Shnia, because the second ear is still intact, right? Shnia Nami, Misakna Rishona. Well, when the second ear breaks, guess what? It should still be a utensil, because the first ear has already been repaired. So this sandal is never earless, right? So same way when the first ear breaks, it still has a Medras because the second ear is intact. But when the second one breaks, you by then already repaired the first one. So it should never lose the status of utensil, right? When the second one breaks, the first one's still intact because it's fixed, right? And you said to us about this. A new face has come into being here, which means at this point, when the second ear broke, and you're fixing the second ear, you don't have the same utensil as before. This is a new utensil because the old utensil has lost both its ears, right? So as soon as the second ear breaks, it loses status utensil. And even though the first ear is already fixed, you're forming a new utensil now. right? Panim chadash is balokam, a new face is coming to being, right? Well, hachanami panim chadash is balokam. So too the case utensil, which is punctured or impaired and punctured or impaired, this is not the same utensil anymore. The first utensil became tummy before it got any of the punctures, right? That first utensil's gone. It's had enough punctures collectively, more than a pomegranate. It should have lost the status of utensil. This is a new utensil. If so, the tumah should have departed. The original tumah should not be there anymore. That is what Rabbi Yochanan wants to say to resolve Chizkiah's question. Rabbi Yochanan wants to say that based on this Mishnah and Kalim, it should be a new utensil and it should not be tamei. Exactly the opposite of what Avraham ben Beryl wanted to say, right? Kari alei leis dain bar inish. Chizkiah was very impressed by Rabbi Yochanan. He said, this is not a mere mortal. Rashi says, he's like an angel. Wow, to make such a comparison, wow, that's more than any mortal can do. You like that? He could go in dain bar inish. Some say that Chizkiah said somebody like this is a great person. So either he was saying he's not a person, he's like an angel, or he's saying, wow, he's a great person. Okay. Once we mentioned these ways of describing each other, let's just talk about other ways how some sages have described other sages. Amar, we're now in 112b3. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Rava bar Zimona. There is the name of Rava bar Zimona. Im Rishonim b'nei Malachim. The early ones, the scholars of the previous generations, were the sons of angels. Anu b'nei Anashim. Then we can view ourselves as the sons of men. If we view the early sages like the sons of angels, like so great that we can't compare to them, then we can view ourselves as people. But if you view the earlier ones, the earlier sages, like the sons of people, then meaning there's always this concept that throughout the generations, there's a Yeridas Hadoros. We go down. We got the Torah, Moshe and all the greater ones were angelic and so great. And as the generations have progressed, we've gotten further and further away from Adam, who's created from Hashem and from the giving of the Torah, and we've gone further and further away. If you view the earlier generations like angels, then you have a right to view yourselves like people. If you view them like people, then how do we have to view ourselves? Like animals. Because again, in relation to them, we're always on a much lower level. So Amar Zer, Amar Rava bar Zimona. Reb Zera said in the name of Rava bar Zimona, if the early ones, the scholars of previous generations, were the sons of angels, Anu b'nei Anashim, then we can view ourselves like the sons of people. But if you view the earlier ones like the sons of men, Anu kechamayrim. So then we have to view ourselves like donkeys. But even with the donkeys, not all donkeys were created equal, right? We have stories in the Gemara how the donkeys of great people were great as well, how they would not do sin as well or eat the wrong things. If you view the early generations like people, we're like donkeys, but we're not even as great as Reb Chanina ben Dosa or Pinchas ben Yair's donkey. You'll have to view yourselves like the standard donkey. Now, there's stories elsewhere how great Pinchas ben Yair's donkey refused to eat untied barley. Now, I've heard so who are the early, so this is a very important concept, and I've mentioned this many times, how we relate to the earlier generations. Meaning, we can't view them as on the same level as us. Oh, if I would have been there, I probably would have had that mess of balsa or something, right? No. They were much greater than us. There's no question about it. We can learn, and now there's many stories in the Torah and in Tanakh about mess-ups that the earlier generations did. But we have to recognize they were great people. We can't compare to them. We would probably faint out of the awe of just seeing them. So we can learn from their mistakes, but we can't judge them or view ourselves, oh, wow, if I would have been there, I probably would have done much better. I can't believe why they did this, right? It doesn't work like that. Like the Jews in the wilderness, for example, I know my Rosh Yeshiva, Yitzchak Fegoshak, would say that the only sins they did were those sins that the Torah mentioned. Other than that, there were no sins. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine going one day and saying, this is the only thing I did wrong today? Like we constantly mess up on a regular basis. Anybody in earlier generations, also they discuss who is early generations. I believe I've heard that it's even 2 generations before us is already called earlier generations. So we can learn from the sins of people before us, learn from it, but not to judge them and not to say, I can't believe they did that. It doesn't work like that. They were much greater than us. That has to be, if you're viewing them like people, then you have to view yourself like a donkey. If you view view them as much greater, then we can view ourselves like people. Gil's pointing out that the story with Akedah, that when Avram told Yishmael and who is it, Eliezer, to sit here with the donkey, he was saying, if you can't see the divine presence, are you saying this on your own, or then you're like, very interesting. Then that same concept that you're in comparison like a donkey. All right, let's just finish up here. Going back to the list of knots that you're allowed to tie in Shabbos. V'noidis yain v'shamen. Knots of canteens of wine and oil you're allowed to tie and untie. Pshita, it's obvious, again, these were made to tie and untie. It's necessary talking about where the canteen has two ears, like two flaps that can be tied shut. I might think, the person leaves one of the knots tied permanently and he just pours the wine or oil out of the other opening, so maybe that should be prohibited. No, these are permissible. These are both made to tie and untie. Keder Shabbos, or the knot that ties on the top of a pot of meat. You're allowed to tie and untie that. That's also obvious. Of course you're made to, that's definitely temporary. If you can't do that, what are you allowed to do? The case where the pot has a spout. I would think about tulim. Since the pot has a spout, you don't need to tie and untie the knot, so you keep it there permanently. No, that's still considered temporary. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says you're allowed to tie a rope in front of an animal in order that it doesn't go out. Pshita also, it's obvious. That's also made on a very temporary basis. We're talking about the opening the stall has two ropes, one above the other. So Rashi says, I might think, we're now in 113a1 Kufya Gimel V'Aleph. So if it has two knots or two ropes, I might think one of the ropes is meant to be tied permanently, and you just untie the other one to release the animal. Kamashmon, but say no, that is also you're allowed to tie and untie them. They're made to be temporary. Amr of Yosef, Amr of Yehuda, Amr Shmuel, of Yosef, name of Yehuda, name of Shmuel, Halacha, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the Halacha follows Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amr le Abaye said to Yosef, Halacha mechal de pligi. When you say the Halacha goes like somebody, that implies others argue. It doesn't seem like there's any machlokas in the Mishnah. Who said that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is arguing on anybody when he says these cases that you're allowed to tie and untie? Amr le my nafgulach mina. Rabbi Yosef back to Abaye, what's the difference if I imply there's machlokas? I'm just telling you that halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Why do you have to say, oh, that implies someone argues? What's the difference to you? Amr le, Abaye said back to Rabbi Yosef, Gemara zmarsa tehei. You tell me to learn the tradition, whether correct or incorrect, is like a song that doesn't need to understand it. Abaye said, no, I need to understand exactly everything that's happening in the Mishnah and the halacha. So if you're telling me this is halacha, I am meant to infer from that others argue. And therefore I'm asking you, we don't find that others argue on that. Which teaches, again, you're supposed to really analyze and understand the depth of the Gemara. All right, shkoyach. Any questions on that?
No, it's good.
Okay, let's go to the Shabbos kitchen. Becoming experts in the halachas of cooking. Page 38. Okay, adding cold water to a hot drink. Okay, so are you allowed to listen to a hot tea or a coffee? At what point are you allowed to add cold water to a kli rishon, a kli sheni, or a kli shlishi? So
What's the temperature?
all our cases are over 110 degrees. If we're under 110 degrees, there's no problem. So when we talk about the halachas of cooking, we're talking about it's over 110 degrees, so it has a potential to cook.
Okay.
The question is, which utensil does it need to be in? And I'm flattered here Murray is joining us for these halachas of cooking. Okay, so let's go. Who can answer? 1, 2, or 3. Which utensil can I add cold, uncooked water? Cold, uncooked water. Which utensil can I add that to?
You just like
The Rishon.
hot food in the utensil, you're adding hot water to it.
No, if it's on the fire, it's a non-starter.
Doesn't matter.
Huh? Okay, all right, so there's four. All right, I have. Yeah. Why? I'm cooking the cold water. Cold water to a hot. Wait a second. If I have a hot cup of water, okay, I have an urn, okay.
Hold on. It's just at 110.
Yeah, but
Once you pour it in the cold water, it's going to be 110.
you're only talking about, so maybe it's 115 degrees.
Oh, that's different.
It's over 110 degrees, so it's at cooking level, okay? Which utensil can I add cold, uncooked water to? Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi.
Usually,
So Michael and Andy say second utensil. Steve says third utensil.
third.
Huh? Carrie says third. So I have an urn and I want to add cold water to it on Shabbos. The urn is off, but the water is 200 degrees in my urn. Can I pour cold water into there?
No.
Let's say I have a hot cup of coffee. Can I add cold water to the hot cup of coffee? So which utensil does the hot water need to be in to allow me to add the cold water? The first utensil, second utensil, or third utensil? So we have here first,
Second or third?
huh?
Second or the third?
Second or third. Okay. Yes, all 200 degrees. Okay, the water is 200 degrees. Gills, what? 200 degrees. Which utensil? It's over 200 degrees. Okay, piping hot water. Which utensil can I add cold, uncooked water to? Murray says two. Gil says none of them. No, it's not. That was what we saw yesterday. I don't care. What? It doesn't make a difference. Once you transfer from one utensil to the next, even if the temperature is the same, in halacha, the walls are considered that it loses the potency to cook it, even if it's still 200 degrees. So definitely kli shlishi, okay? Kli shlishi, other than two exceptions, like the case of tea and the egg, you're definitely allowed to add to kli shlishi. How about a kli sheni? So in general, kli shenis, you are not allowed to add uncooked items to a kli sheni, correct? But if you'll remember, we had four exceptions to the rules of a kli sheni, and one of them was oil and water are not cooked in a kli sheni. Water is actually one of the items that are harder to cook than most items. And therefore, you would be able, so most uncooked items cannot be added to a second utensil. Water can be. So let's see this. It is permissible to, what? What utensil? What about tea essence? Oh, we'll get there. Step by step, we'll get there. Okay, so it is permissible to add cold water to hot tea or coffee in a kli sheni, or to hot soup in a bowl, which is a kli sheni, but not to a pot of hot water or soup, which is a kli rishon. So, cold water, bottom line is those of you who said kli sheni, or if you said kli sheni or kli shlishi, you're correct. So kli rishon is wrong. You are not allowed to add cold water to a first vessel. You are allowed to add cold water to a piping hot second vessel or third vessel. So those of you who said kli sheni would be correct. Okay? Now, if you're adding, is there any way that you can add cold water to a kli rishon? The only way is the way Michael was hinting to before. If I add a whole huge amount of cold water, so by the time they hit each other, the cold water will cool off the hot water.
That your argument goes away because the first drop.
So you would have to, okay, so Michael's saying the first drop gets cooked. So like this. It is permissible to pour a large quantity of cold water into a small amount of hot water in a kli rishon that has been removed from the fire if the resulting mixture will be below 110 degrees. However, this is permitted only if the cold water is added all at once. That's what Michael was saying. So like this, if you add a small amount of cold water to hot water, absolutely not if the hot water is in a kli rishon. But if I want to pour a whole huge tub of cold water on a small amount of hot water in a kli rishon, that's okay, because there will be no cooking that happens because as soon as they hit each other, it will be below 110 degrees. So again, let's get this, a review over here. Cold, uncooked water is allowed to be added to a kli sheni. Most uncooked things cannot be added to kli sheni, but water is one of the things that are harder to cook. So cold, uncooked water may be added to a kli sheni, and for sure, if it's cooked water already, may be added to kli sheni. a Kli Rishon, it cannot be added unless you pour a large amount of cold water into a small amount of hot water in a way that as soon as they contact each other, the mixture will be less than 110 degrees. Questions on that? Okay. What? All right, Andy Avas Chesed. You want to come up over here?
Okay. We've been talking about the. We've been talking about the reasons why people don't make loans to their friends. And the first was ignorance. Second was stinginess. And now we get into laziness. The hassle of lending money. Some people do not give free loans because they are too lazy to deal with the hassle of lending money and then having to reclaim it. Laziness is one of the main obstacles in the path of Torah and mitzvahs. Lazy people procrastinate from one day to the next and never actually accomplish. Doing mitzvahs with zeal. A person should treat Torah and mitzvahs with the same dedication that he treats his business. Merchants are not too lazy to weigh heavy merchandise as it arrives and then weigh it again as they sell it to each customer. They don't mind sitting in a cold store and waiting for customers to arrive, rejoicing with each new customer. How much more so must we apply ourselves to Torah and mitzvahs upon which our eternal life depends? No difficulty should be too hard. Even if a person has lent money in the past and has had to remind borrowers again and again to pay, this should not stop him from lending money again in the future. A store owner would not close his store just because of the difficulties of getting customers to pay their accounts.
Everybody have a good day.
All right. Thank you.
I'd go with Shakespeare's principle.
Take care,
Neither a
everybody.
borrower nor a lender be, for a loan loses both itself and friend.
That doesn't sound like the Chavetz Chaim.
No, it's Shakespeare.
I don't know if he had Torah values.
All right. Thank you,
I
Rabbi.
don't know either, but
What, Carrie? All right, take care, everybody. Have a good day.
will do.